Welcome to January 2016 FrippVT user meeting. If you are with us live, we love it. That's great. You can ask us your own specific questions and interact. If you're watching this as a replay, welcome. We know that you will find whatever happens very useful. This session is called The Quality of Your Questions. And what you will hear in this month's episode, one, I'm going to tell you about an interesting and unusual coaching client I had this week. We will focus on the questions that I ask some of my coaching clients. And by posing those same questions to you, you will find that your message will be clearer, more concise, and more on message. There will be time for you to interact and ask me questions. I'm also going to tell you some of the questions that I use to help drive business, and a couple of the questions that I hear back a part of that process and how I turn them around. As always, my sidekick is Paul, who helps you interact with us. So Paul, why don't you remind or tell our friends how they can participate in polls, ask us questions, and then we will bring up the first poll for them. Thanks, Paul.
Hello, everyone. On the right-hand side of your screen, you will see a chat window. Within that chat window, you can enter your short, specific questions throughout the call, and those will be answered live. In addition to the chat box, there will be polling questions throughout the call. Those will pop up at the bottom of the chat box. You will click your answer, click vote, and then we'll discuss it during the call. So the first poll that we'll start with is, do you have a burning question for Patricia? So just click yes and or not at this moment, and then click the vote button.
And then, of course, if you are one of our live attendees with a burning question, you can certainly type it in. And as we always suggest, short, specific questions are a lot easier to answer. The key to connection is conversation. The secret of conversation is to ask questions. And the quality of the information you receive depends on the quality of your questions. When I was a 15-year-old hairstyling apprentice and we had all these glamorous rich women as customers, as soon as I got to know them, I used to say, what were you doing when you were my age? How did you make your money? Did you make it yourself or did you marry it? Now that was good market research. And my brother has always said, sister, you ask people such personal questions. However, it is because I am genuinely interested. And when over the years I've been asked, where did you get your MBA? Where did you get your degree in behavioral psychology? Both questions they have asked based on listening to my presentations. I always said 24 years behind a hairstyling chair. Because I learned it used it not only as a way to make a living, I used it as a way to educate myself about business. And when I became a men's hairstylist, this is exactly what it was in the financial district of San Francisco. So Paul, do people have burning questions of me?
Well, 13% said yes. So it looks like we have at least that many that do.
Okay, good. Well, so feel free to write your short, specific burning question. Now, I say burning question because my brother, if you were at Lady and the Champs last year and met my brother, he always said burning questions, which means if you think the world is about to end, what must you have the answer for? Well, you don't have to wait to perhaps the world might end. If it is important to you and a burning question, then we certainly consider it important to answer. What I have found in the past, that people have done their very best to get my attention. And I'll say, okay, fine, you got 10 minutes. What is your number one question? And I have had questions such as someone who really want to get my attention. This was somebody I met and heard speak at the National Speakers Association convention and given him wonderful feedback. And I said, okay, what's your question? And he said, how did you get started? Well, I emailed back and said, can you not do better than that? And I'll tell you why that is not a good question. Because based on his credentials and the fact that this was 2014, when I got started, the world was so different, and I came from a hairstyling background, that how I got started then was of not much help to him now. I said, the question you should have asked me was, based on your 30 plus years experience, what advice would you give me now? That would be a better question. So anyway, my client of the week, one of my good friends who's been to many of my speaking schools over the years, Barry, said, hey, can you help out my boss and mentor? And this was a 69-year-old billionaire. Yes, with a B, billionaire. And at 69, this was only the second speech he'd ever delivered in his entire life. And he sent over the script of his 20-minute speech. And the segment where he was talking about his expertise needed very little help. And I didn't know the subject. However, what the problem that most people have, they think they have to thank everyone for the introduction, tell everyone who they are. And I said, no. You're going to have an introduction. And I rewrote his speech for him, which I rehearsed with him, and he drilled it in. But he started with a story about first coming to this country at age 22. And listen to this. He had $17.50. Now, you know, he's most people have never met him in the community as he was speaking, but he's almost a legend because he's done so well. Well, the stories, and Barry said, you should have seen it. The fact that he was so different, he just came out with the story. He was very personable. He had practiced. 400 people were hanging on his every word. So that was only his second speech, and a great success. And I'm confident that he will continue. So, Paul, are there any burning questions typed in at the moment, or I'll go to my prepared ones?
Well, from Elaine,
Yes.
when you're interviewing someone you don't know, how do you prepare interesting, revealing questions?
Yeah, very good question. One, you might not know them very well. However, with a LinkedIn profile, then it's amazing. You can get their business background. If you can, for example, when I'm about to meet an executive I haven't met before, I always talk to their admin about what do I need to know. Because I found out meet mild engineers, one of them went to the Olympics when he was young. So I need to know what type of age, what do they do for fun. And then I would always start with the question I like to start with, and that I recommend people ask me in the multiple podcasts I deliver on a monthly basis. And that is, depending who he is, you are well known in the area of performance, or you're well known in the world of speaking, or you're well known in the world of finance. Could you give us a snapshot of your life? And what I always like to do is go back to the beginning. Is where were you born? What did your parents do? And what advice did they give you that helped develop the person you are? Our values and how we see the world really, to a large part, come from how we were first raised. So that is eye-opening. And I seriously doubt if there were any of our VT community or any of the audiences we meet, excuse me, who could not start a speech with, when I was growing up in My dad was this. My mother did that. Excuse me. And the advice they gave me was, that would be the opening of any speech that could really be quite interesting. So always get to the beginning. So hope that's helpful. Some of the questions that I ask, in fact, I asked it yesterday twice. An up-and-coming engineer in a software company in Silicon Valley and an executive on the East Coast. And the question I asked both of them, as I frequently ask when they're talking to me about what would it be like working with me, is, have you ever recorded yourself? Because the executive was a woman who came up in the world of finance, behind the scenes, and now she's a CEO, and how she communicates is very important. And I said, and of course, the answer is never no. One, you will not improve what you're not aware of. So record and listen. And I recommend you listen. It's very easy. Your sides of conversations, when you're running meetings, even the dinner table, hear what comes out of your mouth. Because for some reason, kind ofs and sort ofs and I would say confident sounding phrases are slipping into almost everybody's conversation. And I always like to say, are you kind of going to do it, or are you going to do it? Speak in black and white. Plus, you're not going to improve the ums that you have if you're not aware that they're there. And also what I find, and I said, I understand we're having a conversation, but you're not speaking in sentences. You're not speaking in phrases. There's no punctuation. If you transcribe what you had just said for 2 minutes, it would be one long paragraph. So that's why. So are you recording yourself? Then when it comes to the message, I always say, if you had one sentence rather than 45 minutes or 20 minutes for your speech, what would it be? One sentence. Because what you have to do is clarify what is the dominant thought or the premise or the big idea that you're trying to get across. And when people answer in a paragraph, I say, no, that's the whole description of everything that's going to go into your speech. What is the big idea? So one, have you recorded yourself? Two, what is the one sentence that represents your entire speech? And then, what is your opening line? Now, a lot of the engineers and scientists and marketing managers I work with, when I go in, they've got their presentation prepared. Now, admittedly, they need to take some of the words out of their PowerPoints because they create them in PowerPoint, which I don't recommend you do. You create them in paper or outline your message and then decide where do you want the PowerPoint to reinforce or keep you on track. And so I say, well, what is your opening line, of which people often don't have. Now, some really good speakers who are going to a conference, and often what I hear is, I like to create an opening that works for this situation, so I won't know till I get there. Here is the Frippicism. Do not rely on inspiration. I'm not saying that situations don't occur that we can create an opening line or adapt a second opening to the one we prepared. Inspiration does not always come for whatever reasons. The muse is not there. You didn't get enough sleep. You got in a lot later than you thought. The audience isn't giving you much. So always prepare an opening that would really work, that you could do with almost open your mouth and it would come out. And then if inspiration hits, you can go with it. One of the most frequently asked within each coaching session is, specifically, what do you mean by thing? Again, if you record your own conversations or presentations, you will be aware of how often you say thing. Now, in conversation, when you don't have anything planned, that might come out. However, whatever you really mean by thing is an idea. Is it suggestion? Is it formula? Is it a habit? Is it a discipline? Whatever you mean by that word thing is much more valuable and will make your message a lot clearer. Then when people introduce an idea, they might be talking about innovation or creativity. And then I will ask, well, what is your definition of innovation or creativity? We can look up in the dictionary, but what is yours? Because very often when you're talking about a lofty concept and we want to stay with your point of view, it's very good. You introduce the idea, you might say, well, this is your definition, and then give us an example, a specific example as when was the first time you came to this point of view, or the first time you had the realization. So if there are any questions, Paul, have any more burning questions come in?
Not right now.
All right. Well, what is the second poll that we will put up before I get to my next series of questions?
Second poll is, do you have a favorite question you pose to an audience?
All right. Perfect. Wonderful. And then if the answer is yes, use it. We want to hear what it is so that we can debate it for everyone. So what are the questions that we use in driving business? Obviously, when the phone first rings or the email comes in and we want to set up a conversation, you cannot negotiate an email. What you can do is find out a little more details. For example, what I've found twice, I have received email inquiries. Want to talk to you about speech coaching? Nothing. This is who I am. This is what I do. This is why I need. Not even where I live or phone number. So I always want, well, tell me about you, more information. Paul, what's the answer, please?
25% said they do have a favorite question, and 75% say that they do not.
Well, from the 25% who do, we'd love to see them. All right, good. So once I get a conversation, my first question really is, how was I referred? Or how did you find me? Did someone refer me, or am I the end of a Google search? Because how you pick up the conversation from that point, it can go in different directions. So for example, if someone referred to say, oh yes, I remember Barry. Yes, he brought me in to work with his sales team. Is that your area of interest? Now, if someone said the Google search, then I might ask, well, what were you searching for? What did you Google? If people are busy, depending on what they were searching for, then I want to find out if it was sales presentations. Good. Well, why were you looking for someone to help with sales presentations? Because very often what happens is, what I hear is, we just got a new sales manager, or we just lost a sale we really thought we were going to win. And the next question is, well, may I ask, how big was the sale? Now, is that a big sale, a little sale, or a medium sale? What is your process? Now, you notice I am not talking about me. I'm not talking about price. I'm understanding as much as possible about that situation. You want to get to their pain, and you want them, and this is, of course, from Alan Weiss's philosophy. We want to get to the pain and we want them to work out how much it is costing them. So then when you get to what services you can give and they ask, oh, this sounds good, Patricia, what would it cost? I can say with a straight face, based on the sales that you are now losing, my fee is inconsequential. With a straight face, because it's true. Then if you're going to work with a sales team or any group of individuals, I know Elaine teaches improv. Then what you might want to know, if you're teaching improv in situations of their life, what does an average day look like for this group? What does the day look like? What are the challenges? And so for me, I want to know, what is the sales process? At what points do people have conversations to the formal presentations? Do they do them in person or do they do them virtually? More and more of my clients now have virtual sales meetings where they're delivering information with webinars. And what I recommend is, well, at least turn your webcam on to say hello. Then you can turn it off to do the demo, then turn the webcam on whenever possible for you to answer questions. It's a lot easier if you can actually look at people. Then here is a setup phrase to get more specific, because when people know what they are talking about, because they know their industry or their challenges, they are not specific enough to know exactly what we're getting into. So for example, I would say, can you help me better understand what do you mean by? And it could be increase sales. How much do you need to increase sales? What are your sales now? What would that? So you see, can you help me better understand? Helps you go deeper and deeper and deeper. And here's one from Rick Barrera. What do you mean by? So for example, we want to increase sales. What do you mean by increase sales? Well, we want to work with our internal sales professionals. What do you mean by internal sales professionals? And then as well, when they initiate phone calls, well, what do you mean by initiate phone calls? So you see, you're really getting for clarity, 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 because you want to make sure, one, are you interested in this job? Two, could you satisfy them? Three, how are they going to judge results? So if it's looking for an executive speech coach, I often ask them, how will you know when you find the right speech coach? And then shut up. Now, here's another, if it's, for example, someone called me about filling in a request for proposal. So what I want to know, well, is this a request for proposal that's just going out to dozens of people? Because one, I do not normally fill in requests for proposals. People call me, they want me. I'm one of 2 or 3 being considered, or they've worked with me before. I'm not wasting time if this is going out over to hundreds of dozens of people. No, they're only going to be probably 3 or 4 of you. Okay, it's worth my time. All right, well, when you went with your request of proposal, how much content do you want? You need to understand, I don't want to spend time and energy creating a document that is not what they think it looks like. All right, good. Oh, very important. And Alan Weiss always, of course, drives at this. Who's making the decision? Now, if you're talking to someone who is giving you the impression they're very important, who is helping you make the decision? And then what I always like to know is, what is your decision-making process? And everyone is always asking for, oh, can you get a proposal to us? Here's the question. How long before the decision-making team are actually looking at the request, at the proposals? So you might stay up all night to do it, and they're not going to look at it for 10 days. And we've all been caught there. Then this is another important question. Do you have a vendor who has been working with you in these areas? Because a lot of sales professionals I've worked with, and me as well, you get caught in sending a proposal, and really they're going to continue using the coach or the trainer or the company they've been doing business with. It's just every couple of years they have to, they're mandated to go out for requests for proposals, and they're really just going through the process. And if I have any feel, I say, thank you, I don't want to be considered, because I know I'm going to be wasting my time. Now with that, so now we have some of the questions I ask coaching clients that hopefully they'll be helpful if you pose them to you. 2, these are some of the questions that I ask in my process of trying to focus in. Now we of course have some questions that I get asked in that process, but I'm holding that to see, Paul, do we have some questions?
Well, we don't have questions right now, but we do have the answer to the polling question. Do you have a question to poll to post to an audience? From Lottie, she says, how are you using virtual meetings / live streaming tools to connect with your audience and potential clients?
Okay, all right. So let's slowly do one at a time. All right, good. And is that the end, Paul, or is there more going on?
There was a second part to the question.
Okay, good. So what I want you, and again, what I do not know is, what I don't know is actually what part of the presentation, but this is good. So can you read it again, Paul, and pause at the end of a phrase so I can absorb it?
Certainly. How are you using virtual meeting / live streaming tools to connect with your audience / potential clients?
Okay, good. Good. And this is a great question, and this is the area that you're working in. Good. And then what's the next part to that?
Does live streaming connect you to a wider audience or a specific target audience?
Good. And what is interesting, because of course this is one, we are using this live streaming technology to connect to our audience, which is you, our community. And also we have meetings like this, of course, as part of our ongoing contracts. And we have virtual meetings like this to attract interest to our services and the services of our guests. Very good. So what else, Paul?
We have from Elaine in the opening. She says, an interesting fact. Would it interest you to know that over half of the top US business schools teach improv skills? And she says it always gets a and makes people lean forward.
Good. And that is the purpose of an opening. And a question is a good way to engage the audience. Now, remember, with any of these good questions, you can always use another, you can use an interesting statistic, you can use a story and then pose into the question. Good. Any more?
Well, there is a question from Susan.
Good.
What did you ask each member of the sales group in Houston? I wondered how you knew so much about them.
I don't understand the question. Sorry about that. Say that again.
There was a sales group in Houston, I'm assuming, and she wanted to know what you asked each member of that group because it seemed like you knew so much about them.
I can't, to be honest, she'd have to tell me what situation it was. I'm going a blank.
Okay.
So you get the prize for stumping Miss Fripp. Wonderful. And we do hope you will send me some questions. We purposely left this fairly open so I can reply to you. And then what is the next poll, Paul, we're going to bring up?
The next polling question is, do you have a favorite question that you ask your sales prospects?
Ah, good. And we can certainly add it to our list. Now, some of the questions that I get asked during the process, and this came in again twice yesterday. This is someone who sent inquiry about speech coaching. And I said, where do you live? What's your phone number? It was just a name and email address. Now, if that is, so thank you for inquiry, but who are you? Where do you live? What's your phone number? You know what you're looking for? And just by sending emails, up and coming engineer in Silicon Valley, needs help. First thing is one, I want to remove my arms. Well, you need a high-priced speech coach to do that. So what I will tell him when I talk to him is what I would tell you. You're not going to improve what you're not aware of. So that's why you record yourself and listen. And whatever you were saying, you might want to script the new type way of saying it. I had one, and this was another billionaire. His chief financial officer said that we'd like you to come work with him. He has a lot of non-language, non-words. We'd like you to come work with him in New York. Well, I wasn't as crazy about New York as I really don't like going to New York. They said, oh, well, he has a house in the Hamptons. Would you like to come here? And as part of the exercise, I had him tell me just the story about how he created this beautiful house that we were sitting outside of. And I said, think before you speak. Just speak one sentence at a time. And if you have any non-words, you're going to have to go back to the beginning again. And it was amazing by slowing down, thinking about what's going to come next. Say it, pause, and I said you can wait as long as you like while you're articulating the next. And it was amazing. And you have to drill these habits. Habits take a long time to get in place. Drill them into you. So then, how long are we going to work together? I have absolutely no idea. Because one, I have no idea what your starting point is. Two, I have no idea what you consider your ending point. Because you often find, and I'm sure those of you who are listening, tuning in, if you do your own coaching, people might say, I just don't want to embarrass myself. Once they've gone beyond that, now they want to be superstars. So I don't know. And most of my executive clients, some of them, I've been coaching with them for 20 years. So it's not every week, but it's whenever they need help. And all right, I'm going to wait, Paul, before this next one, unless there's any that the audience is telling us about or asking me.
Well, we do have a question.
Good.
There's from Steph. For president, what is the best approach to incorporate your stories without coming off as talking too much about yourself?
So when you're incorporating stories about your life experience, how do you not feel like you're talking about yourself all the time?
Yes.
Good. Well, it all depends on your subject. So, for example, obviously, if I'm talking about presentation skills, I'm giving examples of executives I've coached, sales teams I've worked with, and perhaps how I learned the information I'm now teaching. However, so yes, the stories are about me, but I'm not the star of the story. The story is really about the executive I'm working with. The story is about the principles that we incorporated to make him a success. Or it's what were the questions I asked. For example, I was working with this might relate to a lot of you, a woman executive, very high power woman in one of my ongoing client situations. I turned up, we were going to talk specifically about the sales presentation she was giving. And she said, well, I don't want to do that. This afternoon, I am being interviewed for a position that I really want in a division that I haven't worked in. And my competition is the person who's second in charge. The first in charge moved to another company in Ohio for family situations. So really, although she is well positioned, she was really the underdog in this position. And I said, well, what are they going to ask you? And they said, and she said, they're going to ask me about me. And as I hate talking about me. And this is one of the answers that you would be looking at. She's very successful. She wants the job, but she doesn't feel like she can talk about all her accomplishments and not be showing off. And this is a company that whenever anyone's promoted, they always have to give their storyline, tell them about how they got to be there. And some of these techniques, of course, we used in the billionaire's speech. They are principles that work. And that is, you tell your stories from the point of view of other people who helped you become who you are. So I asked the executive, Joni, well, tell me about your life. Give me a snapshot. She said, when I was 10 years old, my dad suddenly died, unexpectedly, 36. And my mother, who was a stay-at-home mother with 3 children, very little money. We were sitting at the kitchen table and she looked at me and said, this is never going to happen to you. You are never going to be in a position where you do not have enough money, you don't have security, and you have to feed your children. So mother is the first hero. Is how did she manage to raise 3 children with very little money while she had to still go back to school and get an education so she could earn more? So one, the advice that she gave, which really became the backbone of her life. Then the second person who became the hero of her story was a high school counselor who really worked with her to focus the areas of her talents and her natural skills and abilities where she could focus so it would be easy to be successful. And the third hero was her first boss and mentor, who really helped her and developed her, and the advice that he gave her, which made her the leader she's become. So this is how you talk about your life experience. And it's not sounding as if you're talking about yourself, because none of us are who we are alone. There are other people who prepared us and helped us. So we look at the story from their point of view, we give them credit. So I don't know if that is helpful, but that is a classic way. And these are really important questions I ask my executive clients. With another, I don't want you to think all my clients are billionaires, but I have had a few. Another billionaire, well, he was a multi-millionaire, but he started as a milkman. At 20, he was on top of the world. He finished work at 7 in the morning. So it was the three people in his life, it was his grandmother who raised him, a business consultant who came in to the milk company he was working in that saw he had great potential, and third, a mentor, someone he considered his adopted grandfather. So you see his life, where you look at you're certainly looking at the three segments of his life, the three chunks of content based on the advice other people. So yes, he's talking about his life experience. He's not the hero. All right, Paul, any other questions or questions that our audiences use?
Well, Elaine did give a question that she normally asks prospects.
Yes.
And it is, what are you bringing me? Why are you bringing me in today? What problem are you trying to solve?
Yes, exactly. What problem are you trying to solve? And yes, and then a good follow-up question always is, how will you know if we've accomplished it? How are you going to judge the success of this process? And so we want to get as deep as possible. Good. How will you know? Wonderful. And it's a good question. And this is what, and when you want to find out how much money they have, what are there any financial constraints I need to be aware of? So, or there might be, are there any financial limitations I need to be aware of? Do you know what was budgeted for this last year? Is this going to come, what budget is this going to come out of? Yeah, good, good. So Paul, are there, at this point, we have any questions to evaluate from our attendees or any questions of me?
Well, there's a question of you. I know you don't typically speak to younger people, but someone said that their target audience is middle schoolers. Do you have any suggestions for a question to ask that audience as a regular opening question?
I was talking to somebody this week whose audience is mostly young people. And I said, if that was my audience, I would either retire, go back to cutting hair, or shoot myself. So you have the toughest audience. And all I can throw out, and this was, I went to see a show in Tahoe with Bill Cosby when he was Bill Cosby that we know and love. And because I'm very close to my brother, I found this amusing. He invited two kids on stage. And they came up and he asked the boy, do you love your sister? And the entire show was built around these two kids. And so, to be honest, this is not my target audience. And so I don't know. I do know that my very good friend Art Holst, who is an amazing man, he was a popular referee, a great speaker. He's a CPAE. He's now in his late 80s, but wonderful, great memory, writes poetry, is fabulous. And he was talking to some young people, and he said, and perhaps this is a line I could use. He said, I know you're looking at me thinking I'm old. And you're right. However, I'm looking at you and I can see you're young. I have been young. You have never been old. So perhaps there's some wisdom and advice you might find helpful. So that might be an approach. That is one approach. Apart from that, I would be more interested in what you do. So Paul, any other questions?
Not right now.
All right, good. Well, we will answer your questions. And Paul, do we have any more polls for them?
Yes. The next polling question is, in 2016, will you use FrippVT more frequently?
Good. And you know the answer we would like. Now, here's another question that I get asked frequently. And this is, how do you work with executives? And this is the situation was I met a communications director at the Reagan Speechwriters Conference who introduced me to his boss, Brian. And it was a three-way call. And the communication director said, Patricia, can you tell Brian how you work with executives? Now, this is what I recommend you do. Ignore the question. I said, great to meet you, Brian, and congratulations. I heard that you turned around this division. May I ask how you did it? And he said, yeah, it was a 5-step process. And for the next 25 minutes, I did not say a word. And when he'd finished, I said, that is absolutely fascinating. And I assume that this is going to be the foundation of the speech you're going to be delivering for your new division at the Moscone Center. So you see what I was doing, and this has served me well. You sell by doing. You don't sell by telling. You sell by doing. You don't sell by telling. So I could say, well, how I work with executives depends very much on what they need. A lot of it we do virtually. Then we might get together in person for rehearsal. So one, I start working with them so that they have an experience of what it's like working with me. And I will often say, if people say, well, we're considering a speech coach, well, why don't you set up a 15-minute conversation and pretend you already hired me? And we work on his or her next speech. After 15 minutes, you'll know how I work, and we will know if we're compatible. Because there are a lot of great speech coaches who I'm sure could do the job wonderfully well. However, as important as a coach's credentials is the rapport and the comfort level you have with each other. And you're going to not know that looking at paper or website. You have to talk to someone. And I'm willing to invest the time getting to know you just to see if we have a match. And don't worry. I have 10 requests for every client I accept. So I'm not going to try to talk you into it if we don't have a match. So I hope that serves you well. All right, Paul, what did our attendees tell us?
Well, in 2016, 82% say that they will use FrippVT more frequently, and 18% say that they will use it the same amount that they used it in 2015.
Well, good. Well, I hope those will use it even more. So what we will certainly, these user meetings are designed for you. It's that simple. So what you can look forward to, we have, of course, various communities that come to our VT meeting. We have our corporate clients, which have corporate accounts, which are interested in driving sales for their companies. And then we have individual speakers and coaches and consultants and executives who want to improve for themselves. Our next FrippVT session for our users is going to be, Paul, February the
23rd at 9 a.m. Pacific.
Okay, good. And what we are going to focus on, Paul, is how to get booked. For those who are speakers and consultants, it's going to be how to get booked. And I obviously, like now, will start with some preparation, prepared remarks, and then who knows, we might have a guest, who knows, and we will answer your questions. So come prepared, and if you want to Certainly, if you wanted to send me questions in advance, that's okay, or just bring them to the event. We will do that. In 2016, I will be having a sales series, which will also satisfy our corporate clients as well as individuals. And I will be interviewing some really good sales leaders. The next one coming up, and that will be in February, that will also be open to the public. You can invite your friends because to a certain extent it's marketing as well as being helpful. I'm going to be interviewing Andy Paul. And Andy Paul is a sales, he's a sales leader. I actually helped him with create his seminars and speeches from his best-selling book. And that will be in February. And what I will send out to all our FrippVT users and various communities in general, Andy interviewed me on his podcast, and that was a good interview on sales presentation conversations. So we make sure that you get that. And any subject that's of specific interest to you, let us know. We will also be inviting, and this will be a little bit March or April, Lois Kramer, who also is very good with speakers and consultants driving their business. And we have some other really great speakers and speech coaches. Most people, we enjoyed an interview that we did with Kelly Swanson. And just a little tidbit, if you heard Kelly Swanson, we interviewed her. She was very popular about her creative process. And she's been considered for a TV show. And the producer, she was saying, well, what did you see of me? And it was the interview that she did with Patricia Fripp, got her an opening to be considered for a TV host. So whatever happens to Kelly, she certainly deserves it. So Paul, are there any burning questions?
Not right.
Well, with that, I say, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends at home or virtual, we hope that FrippVT will be a valuable part of your education in 2016, and we hope you will take advantage. Paul and I did record, excuse me, a tour around the VT campus because we have a few changes, and that is on YouTube. We will be sending you a link to that so that it will be easy for you to remind yourself. If you actually say, oh, I want a little video myself, send it to you, then we'll send you the actual video link for you to keep on your desktop. Whatever we can do to serve you, watch your inbox. And remember, you can register for the FrippVT user meetings. And if you can't attend, you get the replay. So with that, Paul, thank you for your assistance as always. I just want to make sure no other questions snuck in. Often they send us to them just when we're about to hang up. Are they, Paul?
No, we're good.
We're good. Well, fine. So I will see you online. Remember, FrippVT needs to be part of repetition and reinforcement. Find the best time of the day for you. See you next time.